Welcome to Wednesday, What If, by the storyteller. What if Wednesday Addams was a witch, just like her ancestor, Goody Addams? What if Wednesday was called upon by Goody when her powers started manifesting a year earlier than in the original timeline, and she met Tyler before Miss Thornhill, aka Laura Gates? Like, comment and subscribe to be updated. Chapter 15 Witches Class Adele and Principal Weems in the office. Adele knocked on the door to Principal Weems' office before entering, a calm yet purposeful energy radiating from her. She stood tall, her all-black ensemble contrasting with the otherwise neutral tones of the principal's office. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, immediately addressing the matter at hand. "Principal Weems, I need to speak with you about Wednesday," Adele said, stepping forward with a slight smile. "She's scheduled for her therapy session with Dr. Kimbot again, but I think I should take over. Given my background in therapy, I'd be better equipped to handle her, and frankly, I believe it's more suited to her needs." Weems looked up from her desk, regarding Adele with a mix of curiosity and concern. She adjusted her glasses, studying the assistant fencing coach turned therapist. "You're suggesting you take over Dr. Kimbot's sessions?" Weems asked, a skeptical brow raised. "I understand that you're trained, but this seems sudden, even for someone as resourceful as you." Adele's smile remained unshaken as she replied, her tone confident but not without empathy. "I'm a licensed therapist, Principal, and I've worked with people like Wednesday before. I believe my methods would be more effective than what she's currently receiving." She crossed her arms and leaned slightly forward. "Dr. Kimbot's approach isn't exactly dynamic enough for someone with Wednesday's particular disposition. I think it would be much more beneficial if I could step in." Weems paused for a moment, her mind ticking through the implications. "I appreciate your confidence, Adele, but what makes you think you can handle Wednesday's unique challenges better than Dr. Kimbot?" Adele's smile became sharper, her eyes glinting. "I understand her better. Wednesday doesn't need someone to baby her or treat her like she's fragile. She needs someone who doesn't shy away from her darkness. And," she added with a brief glance toward the door, "if I may be blunt, Dr. Kimbot doesn't seem to be doing much in the way of getting through to her." Weems studied Adele for a moment longer, weighing the offer. She was a practical woman and understood the value of having someone who could relate to a troubled student like Wednesday. "All right," Weems finally said, with a soft but firm tone. "I'll allow it. You can handle her sessions, but I trust you'll approach it with professionalism. I don't want to see any negative repercussions from this. And I expect results." Adele's lips curled into a pleased smile. "I'll handle it, Principal Weems. You won't regret it." Before Weems could respond, Adele quickly moved to another subject, one that had been on her mind for some time. "Also, while we're on the topic of Wednesday," Adele began, her voice taking a slightly more contemplative edge. "I noticed she avoided joining any extracurricular activities last year. You and I both know how important it is for her to be involved with something other than just fencing. I want to see her join a club this year. She needs to expand her horizons, even if she doesn't realize it yet." Weems looked at her, some concern creeping into her eyes. "Yes, I agreed to let her focus on fencing, but now that the season is over, she should really get involved in something else. Her isolation is concerning." Adele nodded thoughtfully. "Don't worry. I'll find her the right club. I'm sure there's at least one morbid club that would pique her interest. Perhaps something with a darker theme. I'll take care of it." Weems raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but willing to let Adele take the lead. "If you say so." Adele's tone shifted back to a more businesslike note as she glanced around the office. "One last thing," she said, as she noticed the office's dimly lit ambience. "I noticed you gave me a former janitor's closet for my office." Her gaze swept the small room with a hint of amusement in her eyes. "It's functional. But why this room, specifically?" Weems remained calm, her face giving nothing away as she met Adele's gaze. "It's big enough. And I didn't want a window to be the source of distraction. I prefer not having sunlight glaring down on me while I'm working. I find it easier to focus without it." Adele smirked slightly at that, leaning against the doorframe. Not all of us have a bright disposition, Principal Weems. I can relate. Weems didn't smile, but there was a glint of understanding in her eyes. No, I suppose not. Adele gave a small nod, her thoughts already moving on to the next task. I'll handle Wednesday's club situation, the therapy, and any other issues that arise. You'll see a change in her soon enough. If I may, though, she said, as she prepared to leave, consider giving her some more leeway in her social interactions. She's not a robot, she needs more than just structure. Weems took a deep breath, letting the words settle in before giving a subtle nod. I trust you'll guide her the right way. With that, Adele turned to leave the office, her mind already working through her next steps. Wednesday wouldn't be isolated for long. As long as she could nudge the girl towards something that caught her interest, she would be back on track. Adele was always ready with a plan, and she had no intention of letting Wednesday slip through the cracks. She'll find her place, Adele muttered to herself as she walked down the hall, the click of her boots echoing in the quiet corridor. And I'll make sure of it. Adele driving Wednesday to Dr. Kimbot's office, the low hum of the 1959 Cadillac's engine filled the air, but for the most part, the drive was quiet. The streets of Jericho were familiar and slow-moving, just like the town itself. Adele's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as the car glided along the winding road, while Wednesday sat next to her in her usual unbothered silence. Her dark eyes were fixed ahead, her thoughts unreadable. After a few minutes, Adele broke the silence, her tone casual, but edged with a certain confidence. So, how's Dr. Kimbot treating you lately, cousin? Adele asked, glancing over at Wednesday as she drove. Wednesday didn't immediately respond, her eyes fixed on the passing scenery, but after a moment, she answered in her usual flat tone. She talks to me like I'm a project, not a person. It's ineffective. Adele raised an eyebrow, a small smile, tugging at the corners of her mouth. I figured. You don't strike me as the type who responds well to generic therapy. Kimbot's methods are too surface level. Wednesday glanced at Adele. You're right. I don't respond well to her methods. She's too focused on finding reasons for my behavior instead of understanding the cause. It's like she's checking off boxes on a list. Adele nodded. Exactly. And let's be honest, she's not really that great at what she does, is she? Wednesday turned her head slightly toward Adele. Not really. I don't think she's even the top of her class. Adele's lips curled into a knowing smile. No, she definitely wasn't. I've looked into her background. Dr. Kimbot's career is built on mediocrity, and mediocrity isn't enough for someone like you, Wednesday. She shifted gears smoothly, her gaze focused on the road but her words sharp. She couldn't make it in any of the larger cities, so here she is, stuck in a tiny, backwater town like Jericho. It's not by chance. She's just not good enough to run a successful practice elsewhere. Wednesday's eyes narrowed slightly. So, you think she's a fraud? Adele gave her cousin a sidelong glance. Fraud? Not exactly. But she's certainly not a master of her craft. She's still hanging on to whatever semblance of credibility she has left. You see, she relies too much on the textbook approach. She doesn't know how to read people, not like I do. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. You think you could do better? Adele's smile widened slightly, a hint of pride in her voice. I don't think, Wednesday. I know. She took a deep breath as they neared their destination. I've studied psychology my whole life. I understand how people's minds work. Not just the easy stuff, the patterns, or the obvious traits. I know what makes them tick, how to get to the core of what's actually going on. I see straight through Dr. Kimbot's tired routine. And frankly, I think you deserve better. There was a brief silence, the only sound the hum of the Cadillac's engine. Wednesday's gaze was now fixed on the passing road, but she spoke after a moment, her voice thoughtful. I agree with you. She doesn't see me. She just sees a problem to fix. Exactly, Adele said with a soft laugh, as if she'd been waiting for Wednesday to come to the same conclusion. And what do you think about her methods? They don't work. They're impersonal and lack depth. I don't need someone to sit me down and tell me what I should already know. I need someone who can understand me, not just read through a textbook to find a solution. Adele grinned. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I'm here, cousin. As they arrived at the small building in Jericho where Dr. Kimbot had her practice, Adele parked the Cadillac and shut off the engine. The building was unassuming, a small, almost dilapidated brick structure that looked more like a leftover from the past than a place of healing. Adele opened her door with a calm air of purpose and turned toward Wednesday, who was already unbuckling her seatbelt. I'll be handling your therapy from now on. Kimbot's not equipped for this. She doesn't have what it takes to reach you, Adele said matter-of-factly, her eyes sharp with determination. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Wednesday didn't respond immediately, but there was a small glimmer of approval in her eyes. She might not have said it, but she understood the implication. You're right, Wednesday said, her voice steady. I think you will do better. Adele smiled knowingly, the fire of confidence in her eyes burning even brighter. Good. I'll take it from here. Dr. Kimbot's office, Jericho. The waiting room was quiet, and the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and old furniture. A single plant sat in the corner, struggling to survive in the dim light. The sterile, almost oppressive atmosphere was only made worse by the sound of distant typing from inside Dr. Kimbot's office. When they entered, Dr. Kimbot glanced up from her desk with a forced smile. Ah, Adele. Wednesday. I wasn't expecting, you weren't expecting this, I know, Adele cut her off, stepping further into the room. She wasn't here for pleasantries. I'll make this quick. Dr. Kimbot's smile faltered, but she straightened up. What do you mean? Is there something I'm missing here? Adele's eyes narrowed. I've been reviewing your work with Wednesday. Let's just say I've seen enough. You're not really cutting it as her therapist. Your methods are far too basic, and frankly, not nearly as effective as you think they are. I've made the decision to take over from here. Dr. Kimbot's face flushed slightly. Excuse me? I'm a licensed therapist. I've been practicing for years. I know exactly who you are and what your qualifications are, Adele interrupted coolly, her voice icy and controlled. But in this case, your methods aren't working. You're stuck in the past with your outdated techniques. You can't fix what you don't understand. Wednesday, standing silently by, didn't flinch or even blink, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, almost a semblance of approval. Dr. Kimbot opened her mouth to protest, but Adele raised a hand, stopping her. I'm not asking for your permission, Dr. Kimbot. I'm here to inform you that I'll be handling Wednesday's sessions from now on. You can keep your practice in Jericho, but you'll leave this session to someone who actually knows how to help. With that, Adele turned toward Wednesday, her tone shifting to something far more direct and confident. Come on, Wednesday. Let's get you the treatment you deserve. As Wednesday followed her cousin out the door, she didn't look back. She was ready for a new kind of therapy. A therapy that would dig deeper than surface-level answers and provide something more valuable than anything Dr. Kimbot had ever offered. Galvin family home. After the Gates Mansion incident, late evening, the tension was thick as Donovan Galvin slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty house, each thud reverberating in Tyler's chest. He'd barely crossed the threshold when the anger in his father's voice hit him like a cold gust of wind. What the hell do you think you're doing, Tyler? Donovan's words came out with a bite, his voice as harsh as a summer thunderstorm. He stood at the edge of the living room, his broad frame filling the doorway as if he were trying to physically block Tyler from escaping the confrontation. I told you not to get involved with that girl. She's trouble, and you know it. Tyler could feel his pulse racing as his heart thudded painfully against his ribs. His father's words, that familiar mix of disappointment and contempt, washed over him. Donovan always hated that he had any connection to the Addams family. It wasn't just Wednesday, her name alone sent his father into a fit of rage. It had always been that way, ever since the moment Tyler's mother had been associated with the outcasts of this town. I didn't get involved with her, Dad. I am involved with her, Tyler shot back, his voice growing firmer with every word. And for the record, I've been dating her for almost a year now. So, if you're just noticing now, maybe you should have paid more attention. Donovan's face twisted into a snarl, his jaw clenched tightly. He strode over to Tyler, closing the distance between them like a predator cornering its prey. You think I haven't noticed? You think I don't know what's going on in my own house? I know exactly what you're doing, and it's not going to end well. She's an Addams, for God's sake, that family has been nothing but a curse on this town for generations. Tyler felt the words hit him like a slap, each one more stinging than the last. But he didn't back down. He stood his ground, glaring up at his father with a mixture of frustration and something far more dangerous, hurt. And what about Mom? Was she a curse too? Or was it just easier to blame her for everything that went wrong? Donovan stiffened at the mention of Tyler's mother. The air between them grew thicker, suffocating almost, as if the question had cracked open a long-buried wound. Donovan's eyes flickered for just a moment, something in his expression shifted, but then he quickly recovered, masking it with a growl. You don't know anything about that, Donovan snapped, his voice sharp and defensive. Don't go dragging your mother into this. You don't have a clue what it was like between us. Tyler's frustration boiled over. He took a step forward, his voice low but intense. I do know, Dad. I know that you've spent my whole life pretending she didn't exist. You never talk about her. You just shut it down every time I ask. But I was there. I saw how you treated her. And I see how you're treating me now. So yeah, I'm starting to wonder if you ever really loved her at all. Or if it was just some convenient thing for you. A way to fit in with the normal crowd. Donovan recoiled, his expression hardening, the mask of control snapping into place. That's enough, Tyler. You don't know what you're talking about. Your mother made her choices, and I made mine. I'm not going to sit here and let you question my past like that. But Tyler wasn't backing down this time. He wasn't going to let his father's anger drown out his own truth. His fists clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling with every ragged breath he took. Maybe I do know, Tyler said, his voice thick with emotion. Maybe I've always known. You've spent my entire life telling me how wrong everything is, how the Addams family and people like them are a disease in this town. You've made me believe it, but I can't believe it anymore. It's just you. You're the one who can't move past it. You're the one who's obsessed with what's normal and acceptable. But you never once bothered to ask me what I think. What I want. And all because I love someone who's different. Donovan stared at him, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth almost ground together. He took a long, measured breath, as if trying to suppress the anger bubbling under the surface. I warned you, Tyler. I warned you about her. And now look where we are. You're defending the Addams girl, and I'm supposed to just stand here and let you drag this family through the mud? You're my son. She doesn't belong in your life. Tyler's eyes burned, and the weight of the words hung in the air like an invisible chain. I've been with Wednesday for almost a year, Dad. And she's been more real to me than anyone in this town. So I'm asking you now, why does it matter? Why didn't you care about this until now? I've been with her, and you've known about it for months. Why is it suddenly a problem now? Donovan's face twisted with frustration, but he didn't answer. He just turned away, his broad back facing Tyler as if the mere mention of Wednesday was something too difficult for him to confront. I don't have time for this, Tyler. You're wasting your time with her. You're throwing everything away for some girl whose family doesn't belong here. I belong here. And I'm trying to keep you safe from what they're capable of. Tyler's heart thudded painfully in his chest. You're right, Dad. I don't get it. I don't get how you can be so damn afraid of something that's not even a threat. But I'm not like you. I don't see her family as a danger. I see her. I see someone who gets me. Who actually cares about me. Something you could never do. Enough. Donovan snapped, turning to face his son once more. The anger in his eyes was fierce, but so was the sorrow. It was the kind of sorrow that no amount of pride or arrogance could bury. You want to be like her so bad? Fine. Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when it all blows up in your face. Tyler shook his head, the words heavy on his chest like a boulder. Maybe I'm already living with the consequences of what you've done to me. Maybe you should look in the mirror before you start blaming her for my choices. Without another word, Tyler turned and left the room, heading upstairs before his father could say anything else to wound him further. He didn't have to hear it again. The same words. The same arguments. The same endless cycle of anger and rejection. As Tyler closed his bedroom door behind him, he leaned against it, his breath ragged and heavy. His dad's voice, shouting, demanding, dismissing, still echoed in his mind. But for the first time in a long time, Tyler didn't feel like he was the one who had to bend. He wasn't going to give up on Wednesday. Not for anyone. Not even his father. End scene. Weathervane Cafe. Late afternoon, the bell above the cafe door jingled as the cold winter air swept in, making Tyler glance up from behind the counter. His smile was instant, a familiar warmth flooding through him at the sight of Wednesday, her dark eyes scanning the cafe before locking with his. She gave him a small nod, acknowledging him without words, just the subtle yet unmistakable connection they shared. Behind her, Adele followed in, her posture sharp and confident, as always. Tyler's smile widened, the warmth in his chest now tinged with a touch of curiosity. It had been a few days since that tense meeting with Sheriff Galvin, and things between him and Wednesday had only grown stronger. But the tension with his dad was still unresolved, and now, Adele's appearance in the cafe made Tyler wonder if he was about to get roped into something new. Wednesday slid into a seat at the counter with a calm ease, but Adele stood for a moment, her gaze flicking across the room before landing on Tyler. She gave him a quick, friendly smile. "Hi, Tyler," she greeted, her voice warm and professional. "How's the day going?" "Good, just another day," Tyler replied, pushing a strand of his dark hair out of his face. "How about you?" Adele took a seat beside Wednesday, who was already giving Tyler a soft smile of her own. "Busy as usual," Adele said with a slight chuckle, before turning her attention to Tyler again. "But I've got a request, if you don't mind." Tyler raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Sure, anything." "A latte," Adele said with a small grin, "and I wanted to inform you that I'll be taking over Wednesday's therapy sessions from Dr. Kimbot, starting next week." Tyler blinked, surprised, but not entirely caught off guard. His thoughts briefly flickered back to the previous year, the year when his whole world had seemed to shatter after learning things about his mom that hadn't quite made sense. Adele had been there for him when he needed someone to talk to. He'd always appreciated how she'd helped him navigate the mess of emotions he'd found himself tangled in, though they had never discussed the finer details. And now, with Wednesday's therapy in the mix, he realized how important it must be for her, too. "Well, I think that's a good idea," Tyler said, his tone thoughtful. "You were a big help to me last year. You helped me figure out a lot of things I didn't even know I needed to understand. So, yeah. If anyone can help Wednesday, I think you can." Adele's eyes softened for just a moment, a glimmer of appreciation flickering in them before her expression settled back into its usual composed demeanor. "Thank you, Tyler. I know it's been a lot for both of you, especially after everything with the Gates Mansion incident," she said, her voice taking on a quieter, more serious note. "But we're going to make sure things are addressed properly. For both of you." Wednesday, who had been silent until now, tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes catching Tyler's. "It's not as bad as they make it sound. We were just watching a movie," she remarked, her voice a bit dry, as though the entire situation didn't faze her at all. Tyler chuckled, leaning over the counter to begin preparing Adele's latte, his fingers moving deftly as he worked. I think they're overreacting, honestly. It wasn't dangerous. Adele's lips quirked upward. Maybe. But it's my job to make sure no one ends up in a situation where they have to argue about it in the first place. She glanced at Wednesday and added, it's also important that you're supported during these unique circumstances. It's never easy having everyone scrutinize your every move. Wednesday's eyes shifted, just for a moment, before she responded with her usual calm. I've handled worse, she said simply. They'll get over it. Adele seemed to appreciate that response, nodding slightly as she took a sip from her cup. I'm sure they will. But in the meantime, I'll make sure you're taken care of. And Tyler, we'll make sure your voice is heard, too. Tyler found himself feeling a little lighter at that, the words ringing with a sense of reassurance. He'd been walking on eggshells since his argument with his dad. The last thing he wanted was for Wednesday to be caught in the fallout, but it was becoming clear to him just how much she meant to him, and how much she had already proven to be there for him in ways his own father never could. I don't know what I'd do without you guys, Tyler murmured with a smile, handing Adele her latte. Don't worry, Adele replied, her voice warm but firm. You won't have to. For a moment, the three of them sat in comfortable silence, the hum of the cafe filling the space around them. Tyler glanced over at Wednesday, who had her gaze fixed on the door, her mind clearly somewhere else, probably thinking about their night at the Gates mansion or some other mystery. Adele glanced at Wednesday, then back at Tyler. So, I understand your dad isn't exactly thrilled with you and Wednesday. Her words were gentle, but there was an underlying curiosity in her tone, as if she were trying to gauge how much of this Tyler had processed already. Tyler stiffened a little at the mention of his father, but kept his composure. Yeah, he said after a beat, it's been rough, but she's worth it. I don't care if he's not happy about it. Adele's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, her expression turned almost approving. Good. I'm glad to hear that, she said quietly. You're both stronger than you think. Tyler met her eyes, feeling a surge of gratitude for the woman who had helped him through so much. There was a lot about his past that he still didn't understand, but the clarity he found in these conversations with Adele, with Wednesday, was becoming something he cherished. Thanks, he said simply. Anytime, Adele replied, her smile returning to its familiar, composed expression. I'm here for both of you. Now, don't let anyone make you feel like you don't have a place in this town. You do. As Tyler turned back to finish his coffee making, he glanced at Wednesday again. She was watching him closely, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. You're not alone in this, you know, she said softly. He smiled back at her, his heart swelling. I know. I'm just glad you're here. Adele stood up, finishing her latte. Well, I'll leave you two to your coffee then. I've got a few things to take care of, but I'll see you both later. And Tyler, she added as she turned to leave, don't let things with your dad get to you too much. You've got a family here. Tyler nodded, a sense of relief settling over him as he watched her go. His dad might never fully understand, but he had Wednesday, and he had Adele's support too. And maybe that was enough for now. A few days later, Adele's office at Nevermore Academy. Wednesday entered her cousin Adele's office with the usual sense of cool detachment, expecting the same therapy session she had reluctantly endured in the past. Her mind wandered to the usual topics of stress, her family, her classmates, the ongoing drama of having a normal teenage life when she was anything but. As she closed the door behind her, Adele's sharp, calculating eyes met hers. There was something different about today, something in the way Adele was watching her. It wasn't the usual friendly concern of a therapist, it was something else, something more intense. Come in, Wednesday, Adele said, her tone almost too casual, as if she were trying to mask something. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. I was expecting a therapy session. Adele smiled but didn't answer. Instead, she motioned to the blank wall at the far end of the office. Stand over there. Without hesitation, Wednesday obeyed, her expression unwavering. She'd learned to trust her cousin, even if she didn't always understand her methods. Adele wasn't just family, she was the keeper of family secrets, something Wednesday had only begun to scratch the surface of. As Wednesday positioned herself before the wall, Adele approached it. She traced her fingers over the surface, murmuring in a language Wednesday didn't recognize. For a moment, nothing happened, but then the wall groaned, a low, deep rumble, as the bricks began to shift, revealing a narrow passageway behind it. A strange, almost comical farting sound filled the air, causing Wednesday to momentarily twitch. The wall shifted fully, exposing a hidden, dimly lit room. Inside was an entirely different world. The room was a witch's lair, the kind of place from ancient texts. Dusty bookshelves stacked with forgotten tomes, bubbling cauldrons filled with unidentifiable liquids, glass jars containing odd ingredients, and faint traces of smoke drifting lazily through the air. The pungent smell of herbs and potions hit her senses, and Wednesday felt a rush of anticipation and unease. "This," Adele said, with a rare solemnity, "is where I keep everything I know about witchcraft. And where the knowledge of our predecessors has been passed down for more than 400 years. Only the Addams family knows of this place." Wednesday's lips curled into a faint smirk as she surveyed the room. "So this is what you've been hiding from me," she murmured, her voice dripping with dry amusement. "I must admit, I'm impressed." Adele glanced at her, a flicker of something that could have been pride, or perhaps wariness, passing over her face. "You're not just some normal teenager, Wednesday. You're a part of this legacy. And you need to understand that." Wednesday turned her gaze toward a row of thick, ancient books on the far shelf. "What's our first order of business?" Adele's voice grew sharp, direct. "Burning all of these books." For a moment, Wednesday blinked, processing the words. "Let me guess," she said slowly, her eyes narrowing as she realized what this was truly about. "We'll use the reconstruction spell if we need any of them." Adele's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't warm, it was calculating. "Exactly. But don't get any ideas about taking books and reconstructing them in your room. Grandmama insisted it's too dangerous. These books contain knowledge that's better left lost." Wednesday crossed her arms, considering this new reality. "So, we're not doing actual therapy today, then?" Adele's grin widened, mischief gleaming in her eyes. "You want therapy?" she asked with a teasing tone. "I figured you'd rather learn witchcraft." "Obviously," Wednesday replied dryly. "What's more useful, talking about my feelings, or learning how to hex people?" Adele laughed, the sound dark and almost approving. "I like that answer. But just to be clear, Wednesday, you're not going to go around causing trouble. This isn't an excuse to wreak havoc." She tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Remember, people think we're doing therapy in here. If they start seeing no results, well, you'll be sent back to Dr. Kimbott's, and I'm sure we both know that's the last thing you want." Wednesday considered that for a moment, then gave a slow, satisfied nod. "I understand." Adele's tone shifted back to something more serious. "This is bigger than just some casual spells. It's our family's history, our legacy. You'll need to be careful. Grandmama is adamant about keeping these secrets from anyone outside the family." She stepped toward a large tome on the table and opened it, flipping through the yellowed pages. "These aren't the kinds of books you play around with in your room. If you're caught with any of them, there's no going back." Wednesday remembered the reconstruction spell she'd used last year in her room, how she'd brought an old book back to life without anyone noticing. It had been a calculated risk, and fortunately, no one had caught her. But now, standing in this hidden room, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her cousin's warning. Adele's voice softened, though the seriousness still lingered. "You've already shown you have the potential, Wednesday. But this isn't a game. We're dealing with real magic here. You can't afford to make careless mistakes." Wednesday nodded again, the hint of a smile ghosting over her lips. "I'll be careful." Adele's gaze held hers for a moment, measuring. "Good. Because one slip up, and it won't just be your therapy that gets ruined. It'll be everything." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Wednesday knew that what Adele was offering wasn't just an escape from the monotonous world of therapy, it was a chance to dig into the very marrow of her family's legacy, to master the art of witchcraft and claim her place in a world that had always been hers, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. With a final glance at the books around her, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever this hidden chamber had to offer. Whatever this was, it was her legacy. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see where it would take her. Like, comment, and subscribe to be notified for updates on this series.